right, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Michael Foti. We have a QR code here uh, for our ACOI resident fellow membership. Um, so if you aren't already a member, feel free to scan the QR code. My name is Dr. Michael Foti. I am a member of the Fellowship of the American College of Osteopathic Internists. And our topic today is your career, your terms, what matters before you sign. So, we're going to be talking today about how to properly navigate the career journey post residency, because you'll be getting plenty of job offers as you conclude residency or your fellowship program. And it's really important to align your future career with your values and what matters most, and to just understand the different career paths that are out there. And maybe some of this will surprise you, maybe you know all of it, but I think it's important to know before you sign any contracts. And I can say, you know, uh, your career path will change over and over again. You may ask why am I giving this talk? I am an early career physician, but to explain why I'm giving this talk, in my first year post residency, I had four different jobs. Now, 3 years later, I've been at the same job and I'm extremely happy. And so you may go through different paths as I had, but I learned a lot in the different paths that I took during my career path and along the way so far in the last 4 years. And so I think this is extremely important for any resident or fellow completing their program. So why this talk matters, as I mentioned, as you conclude your residency and fellowship programs, you're going to be approached early with job offers. And it's important to know what those offers mean, right? Uh, some things I'll be talking about. Attractive contracts often hide long-term trade-offs. So we talk a little bit about that. And of course, career misalignment is a major driver of burnout. If your career does not align with your values, especially as it pertains to your work-life balance and what matters most to you, we have to remember we spend far more time at our job, especially in this career as a medical professional, than otherwise, right? So we want to make sure we're enjoying what we're doing. So the myth of the quote unquote perfect job. There's no universally best specialty or practice model. This all depends on what you're looking for and your values. And again, we'll talk about that. Salary alone does not equal satisfaction. And what we'll talk about is often uh, as nice as the salary looks coming from a resident or fellow salary to what's being offered to you, it doesn't mean that you're going to have equal job satisfaction. And oftentimes there are certain trade-offs that we'll talk about. And career fulfillment evolves over time, right? So depending on what you're looking for in your career, and we're going to talk about the different uh, types of careers and their growth trajectories or lack thereof, that might differ from one person to the next, right? But it continues to evolve and our priorities evolve over time as well. So as I mentioned earlier, clarifying your core values because you want your future career to align with those values. So first, of course, work-life balance. What does that mean to you? And that means something different to everyone. So do you value getting home, in the evening, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, and being able to spend the evening with your family and having most weekends off? Is that something that's important to you or not, right? Autonomy and clinical independence. Is that something that you value, right? Or do you want to just come in, see whatever amount of patients the practice throws your way, and as long as you're making a stable salary, right? Or do you want to dictate how many patients you see in a day or in a morning versus an afternoon, um and the length of patient visits and things like that? What type of autonomy do you desire, right? Income potential versus income stability. It's very different, right? So income potential depends on the growth potential of the position, and we'll talk about different positions and their growth potential and your ability to move up, right, or not. And income stability, do you value, knowing how much you're going to be making per year, and just knowing that's something you don't need to think about, right? But you're going to get a base salary, a guaranteed salary, and that's enough for you, right? Or are you looking for a position where you want to dictate how much you're making and how much more you can be making, right? Because for those positions, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, for those positions that have income stability, it's hard to then have income growth because that's primarily dictated by the healthcare system or group that you're working with, right? So there's different trade-offs there. And then whether, it involves any of these components that you may or may not be looking for, components of teaching, leadership opportunities, and alignment with the mission of the organization that you work with. Does it align with your values, right? So these are the different types of career profiles based on different values, right? So autonomy driven, right? Is that the type of position you're looking for? Control over your schedule, practice style, things like that. Or are you looking at something that's more stability driven and a predictable income? You're getting benefits, that's enough for you, and you don't need to have that autonomy. Um, Growth driven, are you looking to quickly move up into a leadership role? Are you looking to innovate within your field, and not just simply practice, but rather innovate and change the way we practice, right? Are you looking for advancement opportunities? And then impact driven, right? And there's a bit of an overlap with all of these, but are you looking to be a medical educator, such as myself, and have that type of impact, training the next generation of physicians, and uh, and all that comes with it, right? Service, right? Is that the type of impact, right? Working for organizations where you can, serve underserved populations. Policies and systems change. Are you looking to get into policy advocacy and government within the medical field and affect change in that way, right? And again, there's overlap here, but you have to think of what means most to you based on your values. So of course, there's the traditional clinical career path, right? And then within that, you have private practice, which is either a solo practice or with a group of one or more other physicians. Now, they have clearly more autonomy there. They're not owned by, private equity or a medical insurance company. So they dictate, how many patients need to, uh, are to be seen or not to be seen, depending on how many patients you're looking to see in a given day in a given week. They dictate the call schedule and all of that, right? Trade-offs there is, within and I'll talk about a bit more of a hospital-based, healthcare system-based, private equity firm, all that, owned company. They have uh, usually they're multi-specialty groups. So, you have ease of referral, in that respect, especially if you're within the primary care field, where there's always specialty physicians that you can refer to, and oftentimes know them very well because you're within the multi-specialty group. Whereas private practice physicians need to establish working relationships with specialty physicians in the area, um, and it depends whether you're able to refer, depending on what setting they're in, right? So that's a bit of a trade-off there. So again, there's also hospital employed physician or academic medical centers. Again, there's more of an administrative burden. You do have that salary guarantee, right, and productivity pressure, but you're losing the um, autonomy, in those respects, right? The hospital system, healthcare system, they're dictating how many patients you need to be seen, how productive you need to be, things like that. So yes, you have the salary guarantee, but there's the pressure of productivity and loss of autonomy there. And then there's federally qualified health centers and community health systems. Are you looking to make that sort of impact and serve underserved populations, right? So these are all things to consider. So what's important to know if you don't now know it now is the rise of hybrid careers. More and more now, physicians are taking on non-clinical roles, not maybe altogether or as part of a clinical and non-clinical schedule, right? So an example there, a zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.8 FTE, that means full-time equivalent, clinical and non-clinical focus, meaning half or three-quarters of the week working clinically and maybe a quarter of the week or a half of the week non-clinically. And that non-clinical focus could be anything. Could be entrepreneurial, could be a pharmaceutical, could be education, medical education, whether in an undergraduate medical education or graduate medical education, and so on and so forth, right? So what physicians are more increasingly looking into is building up their portfolio, right? So are they taking on more research? Are they working, whether that's academic research, pharmaceutical, um, uh, innovation, entrepreneurial, academic, right? And so combining this, and what it does is that you maintain clinical what we call credibility, even though I'm not crazy about the term, credibility. I'd like to think, maintaining your clinical skills and focus. Um, but, at the same time, you have flexibility during the week. Not no 2 days look the same, which is really great. And so you're always doing something different, and you're able to work clinically, which is, you know, maybe, that's one component of it, but also put your energy into something else that you also enjoy that might be related or not to your clinical position and may even inform your clinical position, right? And vice versa. A clinical position could inform a medical education position. It could inform research. It could inform a lot of things, right? Innovation. And then vice versa, a non-clinical position as well, right? But it also allows that flexibility of the day-to-day schedule, and that sustains us and prevents is a preventative measure against burnout, which is really wonderful as well. So some hybrid career pathways, as I mentioned, academic medicine, so teaching, research, simulation, medical simulation, curriculum design, administration and leadership. So becoming a medical director, whether that be of a hospital system or an outpatient facility, uh, a chief of quality control, wellness. Many physicians are taking on non-clinical roles within wellness, such as coaching, whether coaching early career physicians, coaching students, residents, etc. Right? Entrepreneurial, so any startups, consulting for large organizations, digital health, things like that, pharmaceutical and biotech, right? Medical science liaison roles, things like that. And then whether you're interested in health policy and advocacy, right? So in terms of academia as a hybrid model, right? So there's many components of academic medicine. There's clinical, where you can oversee students and residents, teaching within the classroom or within a clinical skills lab, anatomy lab, etc. And then scholarship. So it brings with it opportunities for research, which is really wonderful. Things to look for in your contract is protected time. You want it to be explicitly defined how many days a week you're clinical versus non-clinical. Um, Promotional tracks, right? You want to make sure you're able to move up, from assistant to associate professor and so on. Um, there is a bit of an administrative burden when it comes to that hidden workload there, and that comes with the position. So industry, pharma, non-traditional roles, these offer high autonomy, predictable schedules, right? You're the kind of subject matter expert here in your role, and that offers quite a bit of autonomy there. Um, Depending on your clinical role, this could lead to overall fewer weekends and holidays and call schedules. There's a different metric of success here, and the impact is different, right, depending on the type of role. Um, and of course, you have to be comfortable with, um, you know, your role outside of your clinical role here in terms of the industry that you're working for, and then of course it always should align with your values. So the big contract again, no matter the industry or whatnot, you're going to be offered, a contract as you move towards the completion of your program. And it looks wonderful. Again, having a resident or fellowship salary and then seeing these contracts with often very large sign-on bonuses, loan repayment options, a comparatively much higher salary than you have right now. Oftentimes you'll hear we're like a family, but you want to really read the fine print carefully. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And one thing to note in terms of a red flag is when whether you're speaking with the senior administration, hiring manager, etc., if compensation is emphasized far more than the practice structure, right? When the practice structure is kind of dismissed almost and said, oh, this is boilerplate, this is very much how everything runs, but then they kind of bring it back to compensation. I would note that as a red flag. They're trying to divert your attention away from likely the loss of autonomy you're going to experience there. So again, autonomy, the hidden cost, right? So oftentimes with these big salaries coming from large healthcare systems or medical groups that are owned by private equity or insurance companies, these are RVU only compensation models, meaning you have to meet a minimum amount of patient encounters and patient facing hours um, per year. Usually they give you a year to kind of settle in. You have to build up your patients the amount of patients that you're seeing, and so that's fine. But then eventually you have to hit a minimum there, right? And that comes with the productivity pressure with it, right? Limited control over schedule, staffing, or patient volume. They dictate your schedule. They tell you how many patient-facing hours is what they like to call it per week, right? You don't dictate the staffing, so you usually, often, and you'll see that one of the concerning things that is happening is that staffing has been an issue in these settings where oftentimes you're not having adequate nursing staffing. And so those um, a lot of those tasks fall onto you because other, staff members can't perform certain duties that are done by a nurse. So that falls on the physician, right? Uh, and then oftentimes over time, productivity targets quietly increase. You have to look at non-compete clauses, right? So that basically dictates, um, in terms of if you're looking to change positions where you could or could not look to do so. Um, and so again, big money often trades for big control. So what to scrutinize before you sign? Again, the compensation structure. Is it solely a base salary? Is it RVU based, bonuses, etc.? The call schedule and call compensation. Again, as I mentioned, the clinical support, because if there's a lack of that clinical support of nurses and advanced care practitioners and whatnot, then that's falling on you, right? Um, and you know, administrative time, is there any of that? Also your just general schedule. Are they dictating how much time you have with your patient, and are you comfortable with that? Are you okay seeing follow-ups in 15 minutes and a new patient for 30 minutes? Is that enough for you, right? Are you comfortable with that, right? Versus in a private practice where you could dictate how long you spend with your patient, right? Any termination clauses and what falls into that. Again, when we say non-compete radius and duration, again, if you're looking to change position, they're going to dictate in their contract where you could go and what area you could go to, right? And they oftentimes are trying to steer you away from competing medical groups in the area, right? So you wouldn't be able to go to a competing medical group in the area. And buy-in or partnership pathways, again, those come with trade-offs. So careful with that. So again, read before you sign, seriously. Never sign without independent contract review, right? So having someone else read this contract for you, oftentimes people hire a lawyer or, someone else who is experienced with reading contracts. Reflect on what's being offered and how that aligns with your values, as I've talked about, right? Which is all extremely important. And then I'm sure you have physician mentors. Ask them off the record, right? You don't need to name the organization, but say, this is what's being offered to me. What do you think? And, they have a ton of experience to offer. Talk with them. And if they tell you this offer expires soon, that's often a tactic, not a truth. There's a large physician shortage in this country, and so they need you more than you need them. So questions every resident or fellow should ask, right? During the interview. What does a typical week look like in year three? So that tells you again, year one, you're just building your you know, your patient um, your patient list, right? So um, you want to know year three, once you're settled, what does that look like for you? That's going to dictate what the future holds. Um, how many physicians have left in the past 2 years, right? That tells you about turnover, right? Um, how is productivity measured and adjusted, right? That talks about the productivity pressures that might be placed on you and who has decision-making power, right? How that's basically simply asking about your autonomy or lack thereof, right? So the important thing is that career flexibility is a skill, right? Your first now, if I can if I could teach anything, is that your first job is not your forever job. It doesn't have to be, right? So with everything that I've just spoken about, um, don't concern yourself too much that whatever job you start with, you're stuck with, right? Let me explain that, and be an example of that. Um, you're going to learn and be okay and comfortable with pivoting, right, to another position, whether it's a lateral move into a similar position or you realize that you do desire more of a hybrid career, whatever it may be, right? This is all kind of learning as you go, and that's okay. You want to build transferable skills early. A lot of this is just, taking in everything that you learn from these positions, the good and the bad, right? And um, absorbing all that you can. And what you learn through all of this is you learn about yourself, what you value, and you may not know this, you may not know everything that you value in a career yet. You may not learn this until your first year out of residency or fellowship, and that's okay. Oftentimes you do learn it when you're within those, career paths and you're out there as an attending physician, and then you learn what you value. I can say that for me, for sure, is when I learned it, and that's okay. But you have to be comfortable with changing course. And I was, and now I've been in the same position for 3 years now, and I'm very happy. I plan on staying, right? So you want to be comfortable with changing course as needed, because there's no sacrifice for your happiness, right? That's the most important thing. So again, you're gonna learn all these things: leadership, teaching, research, business literacy. All of this matters, right? Depending on your course of what you value and what you're looking to move into career wise, right? You're going to take all that with you um, as you move forward, and then protect your optionality, right? So you want to be able to, um, again, like I said, pivot as needed, right, and take those skills with you. So again, you're designing a career, not just taking a job, right? So, again, you want to align your work with your values, and again, this may take time to learn what your values are or not. Allow room for growth and change, right? And this happens first year out, second year out, etc. Reflect day in and day out on the career that you have. Are you happy? Are you not? What would you change if you could? Does that change come with it a change in position, a change in job, a change in organization, or not? Right? And you want to prioritize sustainability over short-term gain, meaning you want to make sure you have all the things in place that are going to prevent burnout, right? And that's the most important thing. And that comes with satisfaction in your job. So some key take-home messages here. Again, define your values before evaluating offers. See what you value right now and see how it aligns with the offers you're being given. Um, Again, remember, autonomy is often the first thing traded for money. So if autonomy is something you value, you want to consider that when you're reading the contract. As I mentioned, hybrid careers are an increasingly viable, respected, and growing option. Think about things that you enjoy. Do you want to keep research as a component of your career, or teaching, or business, leadership, what have you, right? Again, read contracts carefully, get help. Don't just, you know, you're going to get the contract, and the first thing they're going to say to you is, oh, yeah, yeah, here's the contract. It's boilerplate, right? Meaning they're trying to say this is the same contract everybody gets. That might be the case within their organization, right? But it doesn't mean that that contract is okay for you, right? So read it well, understand every section of it and what it means for you and your career and all the aspects of your job, as we talked about. Have someone read it with you, right? Very important. And again, you deserve a career that supports your life, not consumes it, right? You didn't spend all this time college and maybe a master's degree and medical school, residency, maybe even fellowship, to then go into a job where you're miserable. You don't want that. I don't want that for you, right? So you want a career that, you know, enhances everything around you, right? And then again, it may take time to find. It may not be that first job out, and that's okay. It may not be that second. For me, it was my fourth, and that's okay. And that's okay because I'm happy now, right? And I'm here to now share this wisdom with you, right? So a question I want to leave you with, I'd love for you to reflect on is, what would a successful career look like for you outside of salary? Think about that. Here's my contact information, as well as for Kara Kearns, and I thank you very much.